Drive the culture forward. This is Hypebeast Radio. I'm Benjamin Rosen. I'm joined here today by Willy Chavarria. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Did I pronounce your name right?
You actually did a very good job of that. That's the white people pronunciation of my name, but it's perfect.
It works?
Yeah, it totally works. Chavarria is the white people pronunciation. Chavarria is the Latin pronunciation. Chavarria is the Japanese pronunciation. And I think that's about it.
What about the Danish pronunciation? Is that the white person pronunciation?
That one is like, how do you pronounce that?
Do people just call you Willy out there?
Yeah,
for
pretty
short?
much it's Willy there.
Oh, excellent. So congratulations on the latest collection. It's been
Thanks.
a real splash. We
Yeah.
wanted to kind of like well, we're going to start there because that's the most recent thing, obviously, a couple days ago. So for people that might not have been able to look at the photos or people that are tuning in at home, could you give a brief description of what you were going for, what the setting was, and what the themes were throughout?
Yes, sir. This collection was coming off of the last collection, which showed in February last season. That was fall. And at that time, we were just coming off of the election results here in the U.S. So during the time of that design, there was a lot of emphasis on resistance. So in the designing of that collection, I wanted to incorporate elements from the Black Power movement, the Brown Power movement, things that I had been familiar with growing up, and with all of the angst and frustration that so many people were feeling in the country, racial, gender, so many different forms of just not feeling good. I wanted to create this show of resistance. So that collection was very much about strong, loud, serious aggression in a way. And then as things have evolved in designing this next collection, I really wanted to have a feeling of romance, something of positivity, and more of a story of unity.
Mm-hmm.
So in this collection, I wanted to show the beauty of what happens when two cultures or subcultures clashing can actually come together in a beautiful light. So in this situation, I used the Chicano lowrider culture, which is also an influence in a lot of my silhouettes and design. And then I also use like the New York leather scene culture, almost from a vintage perspective. But those are two kind of clashing cultures I thought would be beautiful to put together. So those are the two I used to design the collection. And then to show the collection, we did it at the Eagle Leather Bar in Chelsea.
Legendary spot.
The legendary, iconic leather spot. And we kind of like, we had lowriders parked out front. There's a lowrider gang here in the Bronx, actually. So they came down and like represented with their lowriders. And it gave the audience kind of a personal feeling to be involved in both of those elements, to really feel the inspiration of the collection.
And the contents of the collection themselves, like you have a lot of kind of, you were saying like cultural clash is something that you've been working with throughout your career, I think. And a lot of the images, like you have the shirt with like the crucifix on it that says, "How am I going to tell mom and dad?" Were you playing on these ideas of like hot button issues, or was it tough conversations that people have to have? What was sort of the inspiration for a lot of the graphics?
Yeah, well, actually that phrase, "How can I tell my mom and dad?" It's kind of like almost a cliche like cholo graphic that you'll see like on old cholo tees from like the 70s, like kind of, smile now, cry later,
right?
That kind of thing. So I thought it would be cool to have that in relation to like these two double entendre things, like, how can I tell my mom and dad I'm in some sort of gang? How can I tell my mom and dad I'm involved in like a gay leather scene or something like that? I thought it was kind of cool. And then the other graphics you saw were part of a collaboration I'm doing with artist Brian Calvin.
Right. I wanted to speak about that as well. And then that involved a lot of like vices, right? Is that sort of the theme there?
Yeah. Brian and I grew up as childhood friends in Visalia, California, which is a kind of smaller conservative town. It's near Fresno. It's away from like the larger cities, but it has a lot of gang violence and there's a lot of bleakness to it, actually. Larry Clark has one of his movies set in Visalia.
Oh, wow.
But Brian and I both are similar in that we've always kind of felt like artists, and we feel like we gained a lot from that environment as we grew up and grew into our own art. So we wanted to take elements that were kind of basic, mundane Vice elements and use those as a messaging platform. So the garments in the show, Brian actually painted on. I designed the garments, and then together we worked on what he would paint, and he painted on those garments, which will feature in a gallery setting at some point, but they'll be reproduced for people to wear as prints and not painted.
Wow, that's awesome. And one of the things that I also want to talk about is that you describe yourself more as like a visual artist of sorts, right? Do you also see yourself as like an activist? Because a lot of your collections have been, like you said, like you work with the politics of the time in a way.
I think, yeah, it's funny you say that. I've never really thought of it as activism until recently, with so much going on politically that is of discord. It's almost like I think a lot of us feel an innate requirement to take a stand on issues. So I'm not involved in politics, and I'm not in medicine. So I do want to do things that are positive for the world. And because fashion is my platform, I like to use that as the way I convey messages of unity, equality, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you also have, even in the details, like over on the pants, it says like what capitalism is.
Capitalism is heartless.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like,
really is.
Yeah, it's all about like, I mean, you find subtle ways of doing it. I mean, and your collection a couple seasons ago, you had like models literally in cages, and they were all models of color. So it's kind of like you are addressing these issues, right? Like throughout.
Yeah. I think it comes kind of naturally, just given my background and the things I've always been interested in. I've always felt a need to kind of take a stand on making people who were not spoken for feel empowered, and giving light to issues that maybe aren't really discussed, that kind of thing.
And to speak on your background a little bit more, like you said, Visalia, California, and you're relatively new to design as well, right? Like you've been doing this for a couple of years.
Actually, somebody wrote that recently, but it's totally not true. I've been designing for like over 30 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm no spring chicken. Yeah, fact check on that. No, I actually, I started designing like back in the 80s, actually. Mm-hmm. That's how old I am. I started working for Joe Boxer, working with Nicholas Graham when that brand was first starting, before it went kind of like mainstream.
Right.
And it was back in the days when people were like smoking in the office. We were like smoking at our computers working. It was crazy. But that is when I really kind of latched onto fashion as a way of expression. So I got that from Nicholas Graham, very appreciative of that. And from there, I just went on to eventually work for a cycling apparel company in California called Volet, that started working with Ralph Lauren when Ralph Lauren launched the RLX line. Mm-hmm. And I started doing that for Ralph Lauren, and then they snatched me and brought me to New York, and that's when it all started.
And how long have you been in this location for on Sullivan Street?
So this store we opened, Dustin, when? 2010. I always forget. It seems like such a long time, but Dustin knows everything. And we opened it as a different store. It was Palmer Trading Company.
Right.
And we sold a lot of vintage, because I was working for working for corporations that required me to do a lot of vintage shopping, which I love. So I had a lot of vintage. So we were selling vintage and like a lot of American stuff, like club chairs and furniture. And it was a great business. It was fantastic. But I always knew I wanted to keep it evolving. Mm-hmm. Never wanted to be stagnant. So one day we just kind of launched our own line. I was like, let's do this. And we actually did it for a Japanese store. And that was the first time I did my own label. That was 5 seasons ago. We're on our 5th season now. And it performed really well in Japan. So we were happy with that. And I said, let's just keep this going. Until one day I actually came in here about a year ago and was like, all we really have to do is change the name in the window, and we're a different store. So we took down Palmer Trading, we put up Willy Chavarria, and since then that's
I mean, I literally used to live around the corner, so I remember when this was Palmer
You
Trading.
came to Palmer Trading?
Yeah, I used to live right there on King and 6th. Like,
Okay.
literally 1 block away. So, I mean, that's why I wanted to know.
It was dark, and we had a ton of merchandise in here.
Yeah, and it was like you used to have it was like the vintage Coke spoons from the 70s and stuff that used to be in here.
Yeah, man. A lot of really cool vintage stuff, that's for sure. And then we'd carry other brands at that time.
Mhm.
So slowly, as we've evolved, we kind of weaned off the other brands unless it's a collaboration. So now we do a lot of collabs, a lot of stuff with artists, especially.
Who have been some of the latest collabs that you've been working on, apart from
Brian Calvin? Yeah, there's another artist, Felipe Merida, who is an incredible illustrator. He does his art in collections that are really tight. So he did one that was all Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn, and it was all black and white except for the flash of blue that you'd see in like their grocery bags, you get from the bodega.
Yeah.
And he did another one that was like American Indians in the north of this continent. And then we actually did a really cool T-shirt together that was like a take on Brooklyn. It's called the Sellout Tee, and it was all like the favorite Brooklyn spots that people go to, like IHOP, Marshall's, Dress for Less, all that kind of stuff. Looked really cool.
Nice. And you also, I remember there was a really cool photo series on your blog, The Americans, the one where it was like the people that worked in New York City kitchens.
Yeah, I love that.
Could you speak on that one a bit? Because that was a really interesting kind of photo series.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with photographer Carlos Jaramillo, and he's a documentary photographer, and he's Chicano. He's from Texas, but he doesn't really do fashion except for with me, because our vision is a little bit the same. So in that case, I was designing workwear, and it was like fashion workwear. So I wanted to highlight all of the people that work in the kitchens of like luxury restaurants here in New York. So we got these guys that looked amazing, gave them clothes to wear, and we shot it all in the kitchens. Wow. Yeah, it looked great.
Yeah, and I mean, and you kind of, in doing that, like throughout, like I think we've been talking about this over and over, is that you've really embraced the fact that like immigrants really are kind of like the heartblood for a lot of these kind of these communities and stuff, and they don't really get the shine that they should be getting.
Yeah, I think in the fashion industry for so long, up until a few years ago, we've seen mostly the same kind of people on the runways and the same kind of people in campaigns, and it's beautiful that things are changing. There's definitely, you're seeing a lot more people of color on the runways and in advertising. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the market is changing. So these larger companies and corporations are realizing they have to, adapt so that they can actually make sales. But for me, I just think it's great to highlight the real people that make this country up. That's the most beautiful part of this country, is this culmination of cultures and colors and genders and ideas. So that's always at the forefront of what we do.
And what about behind the scenes? Have you seen like a shift in demographics like behind the scenes, or is it still kind of, is there a whitewash the higher you go up, or how is that moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think for the higher you go up, the larger the network of corporation you're working with or whatever, there's still a lot of struggle there, a lot more so than you see like in front of the camera, for sure. But I also think that is changing. We've got models of color, designers of color that are surfacing to the top. And I think there's more opportunity for people in a lot of ways. And people of color or people of oppressed backgrounds have a fire under them that's driving them forward a little bit more.
And what's been the biggest challenge in preparation for this presentation in particular? Like you said, you had a lot of moving pieces. You had a lowrider gang from the Bronx. You had a gay bar in Chelsea.
Yeah,
it seems like you had a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, this was crazy. I mean, we look at each other sometimes, can't believe we pulled it off, because we are still pretty small guys. It's like everyone that works on this brand is in the room. So,
and for the record, there are at most 6 people, I believe, with the brand in here.
I think we're 5 total, right?
5 total. It's a local small business.
Yeah, we're not a whole lot. So we didn't really have a lot of manpower to put this shit together, but we pulled it off. All hands on deck, and we pulled through, and came out pretty beautiful. The day of, we were shooting a lookbook, a video, a rehearsal, the runway, because you got to get that to press, right after the show. Dressing the models not showing up, it's like craziness, and we all held it down. So, congratulations to my crew.
Yeah, I mean it's always mayhem. It's like a last minute mad dash. I feel like no matter how much prep you guys do,
it's crazy.
The day. I mean, I came by here to try and scout out to see what the location was, and I think I came like the day before the collection was coming out.
Yeah, was it a mess?
I mean, it was like I didn't want to disturb because it was like that scene from like Cinderella where the mice are like making the dresses. And stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly
like a steamer in there, like.
Me and my wicked stepsisters over there.
Yeah, and it's like this is like a very like it's a small space in the way that like it's local, it's a small business, so it's like I don't want to walk in here and knock over the entire spring summer 2018 collection.
Yeah. You probably could have done that too because we were on edge that day. We could have missed a beat that day in preparation for the next day, but we pulled it together. I mean, this space that we're in right now is not just a store. It's like our showroom, our distribution center, our sample room. It's everything to us. So
it's a headquarters.
It is the headquarters. Yeah, it's our office, our design studio. So it all happens here.
And speaking of headquarters and stuff, what made you guys open up a location in Denmark and do stuff over there? Because that seems like such a You're a menswear designer by way of San Francisco and New York.
I know, it's weird. Well, we don't actually have a headquarters in Denmark other than like me and my office over there, which is a room in my apartment.
Oh.
So it's really a couple of years ago I had been thinking about living outside of the States because as I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't want to live in the States my whole life. I got to try Europe or something. So I kind of put it out there, ended up moving to Denmark for the beautiful environment, the food, the architecture, the weather during the spring is awesome, and the work-life balance. So it's the opposite of New York in that here we're like 24/7, especially when I have my own business. It just doesn't stop. Over there's a real understanding of you pace yourself, you enjoy the beauty. You cook a meal and it's healthy. It's a nice place. So I ended up going out there. So it's nice that I can come here, get all my fueled up from New York, and then get to Copenhagen, and really take time to design. So I can bust out a season in like a month. Just like not taking phone calls.
Seclude yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Cut yourself off from the other demands of being here.
Yeah, and it's a nice time zone. Because it's right in between New York and Tokyo. So my mornings are spent with Tokyo, and then I get a little break during the day. And then when New York wakes up, it's about 3:30, 4 o'clock in Copenhagen. So Dustin starts hitting me with emails, and I'm...
And you're just in the room, in the apartment, just kind of handling everything from a distance, more or less.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
and
awesome.
how long, or how much time do you spend in Denmark like per year? Is it like a couple of months? Are you there like once a month? What is it?
It's like 6 months a year. I'd say it's a lot of back and forth, but it averages out to be half and half.
Wow.
I'd say. Yeah, it's cool. You should come out and visit.
I've never been. I've been reading about there's like this thing in Scandinavian culture called like hygge or whatever it is. It's like HYGGE.
Hygge.
Is that
Hygge?
And it's literally this concept that you have to be comfy.
Hygge. I think it's called hug. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. They say that there's no translation for it, but it means cozy.
Yeah.
So it's actually, I mean, these guys, the Danish, have design on lockdown. They have got lighting, food, architecture, furniture, fashion. It's all like doesn't skip a beat. It's beautiful. So there are a lot of dark hours during the winter. Like there's very little sunlight. So that's where that hood comes from. It's a way of making an environment super nice, and it feels really good. So every restaurant or someone's apartment you go into over there just feels really nice.
Is there like an example? Like, is it like the temperature of it? What is it? Everything's just like a blanket. What do they
like
do?
okay, here's an example. It's like you've been cold and miserable all your life, and then suddenly somebody puts a big warm blanket around you and hands you a cup of warm tea. That's how it feels. And then the way it looks is like a combination of perfect lighting, perfect furniture, perfect environment. Yeah, it's cool.
That's like a really cool, like that's a cultural aesthetic. Like they just all happen to have like this understanding that it's like, no, that we're gonna make sure that during this really dreary winter that we have, that everybody is gonna be at least somewhat comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets its start.
Was that part of the appeal for you? Was that you would like go over there and you're like, man, they know how to live out here, like compared to New York? Or?
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of like white people utopia, I will say, because it's all blonde and blue-eyed, and everybody's beautiful. It's just the way they are, and everybody's on a bicycle, and everybody's smoking, and they have like beautiful organic groceries in the basket of their bicycle, and they're going home to their apartments that are like well maintained, and they all have free health care, and they pay high taxes. But you know those little those round things you see on the sidewalk from gum?
Yeah.
That we have all over New York?
Yeah.
They don't even have those there. No one would dream of spitting their gum out on the street. It's kind of like that. Yeah. All right. Enough about that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was like, no, we're going to end up moving to Scandinavia now.
I'm surprised more New Yorkers don't go out there, or more Americans. Because
I'm about to now. Like, just from the concept of like, oh, it's like getting handed warm, hot cocoa at the end of the day is like a very normal thing.
Yeah. And the cocoa is organic. You know,
it's all good things over there.
Yeah, it really is.
That's excellent. And then some of the other things, like what do you have? What are you looking forward to in the following seasons coming up? What have we got to look forward to?
You know, it's funny. I as soon as the last walk of the model is done on this last runway, it's like my ideas are pouring in for what the next collection is going to be about. So I think it's going to be a surprise. Can't really talk about it yet. But it's going to be nice. Yeah. It's going to be nice.
That's awesome. And I mean, you know, if there was anything that you could impart, usually we like to try and include something where it's like if there was an aspiring designer, an aspiring visual artist, or someone that's looking to this as an example, do you have any advice that you would give to, like, say, like a 17-year-old version of yourself that would help you get to where you are now?
Yeah. You know what I would say? I would say work your ass off and stay focused. That's the best advice you could get, because we live in a day and age right now where things are so fast, and so many young people are expecting things to happen quickly. And there's this notion of instant reward, and it just doesn't happen that way. You know, it's very important to learn from experience. So I think it's good to just work. Working for another brand is always great to gain experience. But yeah, just bust your balls and stay dedicated. That's the advice.
Would you say that you like your time spent with like Joe Boxer and RLX and stuff like that? Was that like your apprenticeship? Was that like you were learning kind of like in the trenches?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I went to school and I went to art school, but it was during a time when the internet was being launched, basically. So things changed so rapidly that when I got out of school, I was kind of standing there with like a pair of scissors and rapidograph pencil, and I was like, wait a minute, I need to learn Illustrator and all this stuff. So for me, school was great because there's a lot you learn in school, but I really got most of my experience from hands-on working and learning from the other people that I was working with, like Ralph Lauren personally, or Nick Graham personally, or any of the people that were like mentors to me, basically.
Wow. Do you have is there a cool Ralph Lauren story that you can share? Is that what was working with?
I mean, those guys directly? Yeah. They snatched me up when I was just kind of like a little hillbilly kid living out in California, working for that cycling apparel company. Right. So when I got to New York, I was like, oh my God, where the heck am I? This is crazy. And I was in a big like corporate office in New York, and everybody was beautiful and blonde, and all the girls like didn't eat, and they had on like head to toe fancy clothes. I felt so crazy. And with one of my first paychecks, I actually went and bought a pair of Gucci loafers so I could fit in and I could be like, cool looking. And so for my first Ralph meeting, they're called Ralph meetings, and everyone sweats them big time before they start. I had on my Gucci loafers and my pencil, and I was all ready. And then the meeting, we were all waiting for Ralph to come in. And then somebody whispered to somebody, and they whispered to somebody else, and then they came over to me and said I had to leave because I was wearing Gucci loafers and not Ralph Lauren, and my heart broke.
They literally quietly they told you couldn't be in there?
Well, you had to wear Ralph to a Ralph meeting.
Wow.
You couldn't wear another brand. But other than that, I got a lot of good experience there. Really loved it.
That's awesome. I'm sure people would love to hear that there's a thing called, they call them Ralph meetings.
They call them Ralph meetings, and people cry. Women have breakdowns. Men don't shower for days. They go to the gym across the street to shower in preparation for a Ralph meeting. And then he would come in and dart over to a picture on the wall and take it off the wall and then hand it to whoever was in charge of the meeting and then leave. They were high impact. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's not a picture. He's not really in that picture anymore. So I don't know what's going on over there now.
But back in the days, it was kind of eccentric. It was.
Oh yeah. It was intense.
Yeah, I feel like people need to hear more of the insider, the weirdness of the fashion industry.
There's plenty of it. There's plenty of it that can't be spoken of. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the part that's most frustrating, is that it kind of gets kept behind closed doors. But even a concept of your CEO will come in, take a painting off a wall, and then that was it. And that was this week's.
He had other things on his mind, I think.
Yeah, bigger, more important things.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh man, thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing some of these stories, sharing your time. Thank you for having us in here. Yeah. And really, man, congratulations on the collection.
Thank you.
It's been
a pleasure.
Awesome to watch.
All right.
Thank you.